So I'm Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and welcome to the Big Game Hunter TV. And this is a new feature I'm rolling out. I've been doing videos and podcasts for years about job search, but I'm adding something that's a little bit different. And it's the notion of what it's like to work in particular careers, what it's like to work in particular fields. And Stan Stewart is going to be my first guest. Stan has been doing remote IT work for a number of years, and I thought he might be a good person to launch with because I've known Stan for a long time. It's not like I'm talking to a stranger or someone stranger than he is anyway. Stan, welcome. Thanks for making time.
And thanks for setting this up.
You're welcome. So what was your exact title, or what is your exact, it's a was, right?
It's a was.
What was your exact title when you were doing remote IT work?
My exact title was Incident Queue Coordinator and NAS Specialist.
Oh my God.
I know.
It's almost pornographic. So what exactly did you do? What sort of responsibilities did you have? If I'm interpreting correctly, it was like remote Unix systems administration work, right?
It was actually primarily storage.
Ooh.
So I did, because I was the incident coordinator, I was the one who saw the tickets that came from the customer first. And when those came in, I would do initial triage that might include some actual, technical troubleshooting, or it might just be things like, oh, this doesn't really belong to us. It really belongs to somebody who deals with Windows permissions, for example, or things like that. And so depending on what kind of a ticket it was, I would either work it, until it was done, or I'd hand it off to one of my coworkers, or I'd hand it off to a different team.
Gotcha. So what was it like for you? Was it what you expected it to be? Give us a sense of that.
It really was pretty close to what I expected it to be, because I've been working technology for many years.
Like how many years have you worked in IT now?
I don't know if I want to say that.
Less than 100, more than 100?
Less than 100, but more than 2 decades.
Ooh, okay. So we're somewhere between a bread box and a Buick. Okay, got it.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
So because I've worked in IT for a long time, much of what I did was expected. I guess the unexpected bits were, even when I got hired for that position, I always expected that at some point I would actually meet the people I worked with, for example.
Ooh.
And it never happened. I never, ever met my boss, my team lead, my coworkers. None of them. Never met any of them face to face.
So remote for you basically had you working at home with no real contact with anyone from your firm. Nothing in person, certainly over the phone, I would imagine.
Oh yes, certainly over the phone, and of course conference calls. We actually never even did this kind of thing. We never did like a Zoom or a Skype or anything like that. So there was not even the familiarity with people's faces initially. Eventually, both the company that I worked for and the client that we worked for created address books that included the option to have a photograph, and they asked us to make sure that that was populated. Well, some of us did that and some of us didn't. And so there was still kind of a little bit of a disconnect in terms of that level of familiarity.
And I know I take that kind of stuff for granted. And in the work that I do as a coach, I try to have, connection with the people that I coach by doing as much as possible by video, because there are lots of little things that I know I pick up in the course of conversation with people just by seeing their face and watching their reaction, noticing their eyes look up at particular times, or that annoyed look on their face that I suspect you weren't getting at all.
Well, and that's one of the tricks, even not only with coworkers, but also with customers. So because I was working troubleshooting tickets, Obviously, I had to work with customers on a frequent basis, and it was either instant message chat, which was on the keyboard, or via phone. Occasionally via email, but that was not my preferred method because obviously that slows down the conversation considerably.
Sure.
But even those things, obviously, there's that disconnect that you're talking about. There's none of the other cues that we get from seeing the person's face or body language, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. What was a typical day like? What kind of hours did you work? Did you have to do a lot of overtime work or work on the weekend? What kind of stuff did you run into? I'm trying to give folks a context for this work life that you had.
Well, it's IT work, so I definitely had overtime work. We had a schedule for on call, and whoever was on call, of course, would take the calls during those off business hours. And the other thing, of course, because it's IT, is we would have maintenance windows. And occasionally the whole team or just a couple of us would come in. See, I still use the language, even though I was totally remote. The point is, would get online and, do an upgrade or whatever the thing was for the maintenance window, install a patch, those kinds of things. But the typical day, I worked 9 to 5. And though I worked 9 to 5 in my own time zone, we eventually got to the point that we had to hire a second person who did the exact same thing that I did, but did it on the Pacific time zone so that there would be a match with either customer, either the East Coast or the West Coast customer. And so eventually we did that. But in the meantime, so I worked 9 to 5. And because I was initially sort of the only person who did what I did, I frequently found myself working until 6:30 at night in order to, complete something, knowing that if I didn't, that it would still be hanging out waiting for me in the morning. So what I found myself doing was expanding those hours repeatedly. And eventually I asked my boss to, if we could hire somebody else so that I could limit the times that I would have to do that rather than doing it literally every day eventually. Yeah. Because it was affecting my personal life, affecting my ability to have my primary relationship and all those kinds of things. And so we were able to get that higher, and that allowed me to come back closer to the 9 to 5.
Closer, but not quite there.
Never quite got there, but got pretty close. One of the things that I discovered in doing remote work is that, in my own personal judgment, it's not cut out for everybody. Like, some people just are not the kind of self-starter or don't have this sort of discipline to kind of keep it going. And what would end up happening is I know that several people, while I was in this role, were laid off. And my suspicion, I wasn't the manager, so I don't know for sure, but my suspicion was that, the fact that they would go AWOL for 2 or 3 days at a time was probably part of why they ended up not staying.
You think?
Well, that would be my guess.
Especially since what you're doing is dealing with a customer who's got a crisis on their hands or think they have a crisis on their hand, and they're not around for 3 days or right. 2 days. Makes no difference. Exactly. And no one knows where they are, and there's the expectation that they're on call to help, and where are you?
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Could you talk about tough situations that you were faced with in this role, problems that you had, that sort of thing?
I think probably one of the most notable and repeatable things was that the throwing it over the wall issue. And what I mean by that is somebody would, discover that there was a problem, the customer was describing to them a problem, and they would go, oh, that must be storage. And so they would do what we call throw it over the wall. Namely, they would simply reassign the ticket from whatever their group was, whether it be host-based or permissions-based or network or whatever, and they would simply assign it to the storage group. In the particular client that we worked for, that was not the methodology they wanted us to do. The methodology they wanted us to do was to take the ticket and retain ownership for the ticket and send a task to the group that they thought might also be involved, so that they still are the face to the customer primarily when the customer comes back and says, well, what's going on with this ticket? I gave it to you. So what happened to it? And that was what the customer was asking us to do, the client that we worked for. But it didn't always happen that way. And one of the things that came out of that was in ITIL, there is a methodology called complex issue resolution, or CIR. And so what we started to do was we started to create these complex issue resolution teams. And a lot of my coworkers would end up sort of tapping me for it and say, they want us to do another CIR. Can you walk me through it? And so sometimes I would do it, or sometimes I would just say, well, what are you saying? Like, at what level do you need me to walk you through it? Is it the technical level? Is it the process level? Is it, because if it's the process level, you've already taken the training. So if you don't know it now, and I wouldn't say quite this way, I would be more collegiate, but I would basically say, the training was supposed to get you to the point where you would understand this. So maybe what we could do is I'll take ownership of the complex issue, and I will, be your mentor in walking through the process. So
why did you opt to do that? Was it because you recognized that they didn't have confidence or competence to handle it, and you want to do it from that perspective, get credit for the resolution, and they didn't? After all, you were going to be doing 90% of the work.
Well, and to be honest, that was part of it.
Good.
Because if I got credit, if I showed up as the complex issue resolution lead, then, I would get a sort of credit for having done that. The other thing is that it's called complex issue for a reason. It needs somebody in charge who can see the big picture. And if somebody is kind of the throw it over the wall kind of person, which a lot of these people were, they're not going to be the people who are more likely to be able to see the big picture. And so the other thing that I found is, I will say this, almost everyone that I did the mentoring process with was able to do it themselves next time. So it was also a successful, because, once it became a successful approach, then I was more likely to do it, because not only would I get the credit, but I would also have this track record now of it being a successful process. Mm-hmm. So got to the point where there were a number of people on the teams who were able to lead these CIRs. So.
What do you like about doing remote work? Was there anything that you liked about it? Let me ask that.
Yeah. Actually, I think the best thing about it is, twofold. One thing is there are fewer distractions than a cubicle. So when I've done cubicle work, my impression and my experience there was that every few seconds, there was an opportunity to become completely distracted with whatever, gossip, people talking on their own phone, but so loud that, you had to plug your ears in order to not overhear, and, different things like that. So, so the distractions are less if you're the kind of person who's good at working remote. Obviously, I could have lots of distractions because I could have, the laundry or
the guitar.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as long as one is relatively self-disciplined, there are fewer distractions in the remote work. So that's one thing I liked about it. The other thing is, I'm a pretty significant introvert, and it's not unusual in IT to find people who are introverted. And so the remote work definitely lends itself to the introverted sort of person, because as an introvert, I can continue to get the work done and feel fueled up for all those calls with customers and coworkers and all that kind of stuff, because I've also had the time to myself, sitting in my own office, working away.
Gotcha. What didn't you like? What was the thing that got under your skin regularly or enough times that you started to notice it?
Two things. I think, the anonymity of remote work allows some people to sort of feel like they can allow their egotism, and I'll unpack that a little bit, to kind of overflow a little bit and become a little sort of bullying, actually. So there's a lot of ego in IT work, myself included. There are a lot of people who they build up their personal knowledge base and their resume and all that kind of stuff, and they end up feeling like, wow, I know a lot about my field. And so sometimes when we would get on calls, some of those people would sort of try to run the show, but not in a constructive way, in a way that was, like I said, kind of almost sort of just borderline bullying, where they would try to take over the conversation and in a way that was blaming, sort of, it's your fault kind of thing.
Yeah, it's the kind of stuff that happens on Facebook or other platforms where, from anonymity, people feel like they can bully others, be rude to others, stuff along those lines. And being the support person puts you on the receiving end. Folks, you haven't done that with people in India before, have you? Come on.
That's right. That's right.
That person could be in America, and you could be talking to him. We could be talking to him right now. So
that's right. And the other thing that eventually got on my nerves was simply never having the real life interactions. Not, as I said, not even to this level, where there was at least a face to go with the voice.
Gotcha. And thus, if you were to change anything about the job, about doing remote work, what would be the thing that you'd want to change?
If it were my call, one of the things I'd want to do is say, I don't know, once a year, once every 6 months, once a quarter, depending on, how challenging it was, the size of the group was, or whatever. I'd say, we're having a in real life get together, a party, a brainstorming session. I don't know, anything, all the above. Spend a whole weekend together or something, and split it up. Have some of the time be, how could we be more proactive in our jobs? But also, have some time to go out to Dave and Buster's and shoot pool or whatever, that kind of thing as well. Mm-hmm. So
I wonder, and this is me musing, no relationship to your T-shirt, which I'll get to later. I'm musing here a little bit, and I'm wondering if something like a video chat through like Facebook Messenger as a way of connecting with people, especially when they have issues, becomes a useful way for you as a support person to have that connection with someone, remove the anonymity, that they can see the face that goes with the voice, so they're not quite as abusive as they might be. Do you think that might have helped you as well?
I think that could have been a help. And at one point, when Google Hangouts first came out and we thought it was going to be the bee's knees, there was some talk about using it. Unfortunately, in the initial testing, it just got so glitchy after we hit like 4 or 5 people that we never went any further with it. But yeah, I think something like that could have definitely been an asset.
I was using Skype for a while for coaching. I didn't find it quite as stable as I had liked. I've switched over to Zoom now. No, I don't have an affiliate link, folks. This is just me telling you the truth. I like Zoom as a platform. It makes it a lot easier to work with folks. A lot of turnover in the role?
I wouldn't say a lot. Of the maybe 12 people who were on the team when I first was hired, 8 of them were still there when the entire team was off.
Gotcha. What creates the most stress for you in this role? Other than you, of course, because I know you well enough to know that you feel internalized pressure to do a great job.
Well, and I think that was kind of where I was headed. So if I exclude that, it's probably still something along the lines of the what I would call the dead days. So occasionally you would get to a day, there'd be no tickets in the queue. We'd already kind of done a couple of days of proactive work or different things like that. And so, all those scripts were kind of nicely hashed out and things were looking pretty good and, nothing was blowing up. I think those are the toughest days because those are the days when I'm sort of trying to dream up something to, stay fully engaged. Of course, an hour later, there's probably a customer, screaming, but
it all blows up.
But there would be, it was fairly rare, but I can probably remember 3 times in 6 years where literally I had hours at a time where I was just literally just going, okay, I got to find something else to do now.
Hey, Stan, thanks for making time today. What's Muse for now?
This is my website, and I am also a musician, and so it's where I put out my poetry and my music and all that kind of stuff.
.com?
Yes.
Just make sure. MUZ4now.com, folks. If you want to hear something beyond simply being a remote IT worker and what Stan does for fun and some profit as well, I assume. And if you'd like to thank him by buying some music from him, I'm sure he wouldn't mind, okay?
Not at all.
Hey, Stan, thanks for making time, folks. This is Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter. There are going to be more videos like this on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed this one. I'll be back with another one soon and hope you have a great day. Take care.